every meter that Ukrainian forces regains is a meter that Russia loses.
This is my video update from Nicosia, Cyprus on this Friday early evening. Let's talk about some news. September the 29th, early evening here in Nicosia, Cyprus. Let's talk about some news. And let's talk about Mr. Stoltenberg, the NATO head honcho, the big guy at NATO, Mr. Stoltenberg. And he paid Elensky a surprise visit in Kiev. He traveled to Kiev along with the defense minister of France and I believe the defense minister of Germany. And they all traveled to Kiev to surprise Elensky. And according to the New York Times, they wanted to go to Ukraine to show solidarity with Elensky and Ukraine. They wanted to console Elensky after what was a very, let's just say a very difficult trip for Elensky to the United States, and especially in Canada. So Stoltenberg, he was in Kiev. He surprised Elensky. Surprise, Volodymyr. It's Stoltenberg. How you doing? And yeah, Stoltenberg said, as long as it takes, we are going to support Ukraine for as long as it takes. And then Stoltenberg said that all is well, all is well with the big super duper counteroffensive, because every meter that the Ukraine military takes is 1 meter that the Russian military loses. That is the logic, folks. There it is from Stoltenberg. That's victory. That is victory, according to Stoltenberg. Of course, Stoltenberg doesn't mention all of the military hardware and resources that Ukraine has lost capturing that 1 meter. And worst of all, the real tragedy to all of this is that Stoltenberg doesn't mention all of the lives lost in order to capture this 1 meter. Stoltenberg does not say that for Ukraine to capture this 1 meter, it cost thousands and thousands of Ukraine soldiers' lives. That he does not mention. Maybe he just forgot. Maybe Stoltenberg just forgot to mention that, as he was trying to sell us what victory looks like in this big super duper counteroffensive. Capturing a meter of territory means that Russia loses a meter of territory, according to Stoltenberg. But the New York Times, they see things differently. Hello, Mr. Robot. The New York Times, they see things very differently. And they put out an article, quite a long article, a lot of maps as well. And the New York Times basically said that the Ukraine super duper counteroffensive is over. It's over. That is what the New York Times said in this latest article that they put out. Let's see here. Do I have the article handy? I think I've got it somewhere. Yes, I do. The title of the New York Times article is "Who's Gaining Ground in Ukraine? This year, no one." So what this article is, the New York Times is basically announcing the end of the super duper counteroffensive. I imagine the powers that be, the Pentagon, the Sullivans and Blinkens of the Biden White House, the Lloyd Austins, I imagine that they called up the New York Times and they said, look, we need you to break the news in your New York Times special kind of way. Break the news to the American public, to the world, that the big super duper counteroffensive has failed, but don't call it a failure. Don't call it a failure, call it a stalemate. A stalemate. And preparation for a long war. a stalemate with preparation for a long war, and that is exactly what the NYT did in this article, and they put out a lot of maps. And the interesting part about the maps is when you look at the maps, it actually shows that there was a country, there was a side that actually did make pretty good gains. I don't want to say significant gains, but they got back some territory that you could say Ukraine gained during the big super duper Kharkiv offensive, and that is Russia. When you look at the maps, you see that during Ukraine's offensive, Ukraine's big 4-month offensive, the country that got more territory ended up being Russia. And Russia basically got territory that Ukraine got during the Great Kharkov super duper offensive, which wasn't really much of an offensive because the Russian military, they ceded that territory in order to move towards a better defensive position. So that is what the New York Times actually shows, that during Ukraine's 4-month counteroffensive meant to reach the Sea of Azov and meant to split the Russian forces in two, actually turned out with a Russian territorial gain in the north. And there are reports now that Russia has blown up 3 bridges, I believe, in the Oskol River. And this could be a sign that the Russian military may make moves from east to west towards Kupiansk, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong about that, but there are some reports saying that the Russians may be preparing for their own offensive in the north. I'm not sure it'll be a big offensive, but an advance in the north region, in the Kharkiv region, to move closer to Kupiansk. But that's not confirmed. What we do know is that 3 bridges were blown up by the Russian military along the river. Anyway, that's the New York Times. The New York Times is saying that this is a stalemate. No one gained anything, and it is the New York Times officially calling this one. They're calling it. The offensive is over. In about a week and a half, the rain and the mud will arrive, and this thing is done. And so the New York Times is letting everybody know in the collective West that we're going to see a shift to a long war. That is the narrative. Not as long as it takes, Mr. Stoltenberg. Long war. That is the narrative. So the BBC, let's see, the BBC, they put out an article yesterday, and they came to the defense of one Canadian Prime Minister who goes by the name of Justin Trudeau. And the BBC, they ran an article talking about Ukraine's role in World War II. And this article, what this article is really about, it's about the BBC basically coming to Trudeau's aid and helping to push the Trudeau narrative that what happened in the Parliament in Canada was Russian disinformation. That is basically what the BBC was doing in this article that they put out there. The British state broadcaster coming to the support of Trudeau and the Canadian Parliament, in a way sanitizing the whole NAZI SS Galician 98-year-old veteran debacle. That is basically what the BBC has done in this article. The title of this article is, let me find it here. Do I have it? Yes, I do. The title of this article is Canada Nazi Row Puts Spotlight on Ukraine's World War II Past. And so this article is fairly long. I don't think it's a huge post, but it's a fairly long article, and it talks about the role of Ukraine in World War II. It talks about how many NAZIs made their way west, made their way to the UK and South America, some of them, and the US, and of course Canada. And then towards the end of this article, it talks about Russian disinformation and how Russian disinformation is being used to further dramatize this incident at the Parliament in Canada. This incident at the Parliament in Canada, according to the BBC, the general vibe of the BBC article is that this incident at the Parliament in Canada is really not such a huge scandal. And Russian disinformation, it's kind of blowing it out of proportion. That's basically what the article is saying. But you know, the article says some other things which I found very interesting. This is coming from the BBC. The BBC, in this article, they say that this SS 98-year-old veteran, they basically say that this guy has not been given his fair shake. He hasn't been given due process, and basically these are just allegations that he was an SS NAZI. They actually interviewed some Canadian, Ukrainian diaspora, some people from Ukraine who are living in Canada, and they basically said that this guy, Hunka, that he wasn't afforded due process. This person, and I quote, this person is a victim of a Russian narrative that has now been successful, according to a Mr. Podilsky. This is someone that the BBC interviewed. They got Mr. Podilsky's take on this. And the BBC said that there is no evidence linking this veteran to war crimes. That's interesting. No evidence linking this person to war crimes. He hasn't been afforded due process. This is coming from the BBC. Maybe someone should perhaps forward this whole due process. These are just allegations, statements from the BBC. Maybe they should forward them to, I don't know, say, Russell Brand, right? When you talk about allegations and not being afforded due process, basically the BBC is saying that Russian disinformation is smearing this 98-year-old veteran. Very interesting statements from the BBC. And the BBC in this article, they also interviewed a professor, Professor Marples. And this professor, he said that while far-right extremism still exists in Ukraine, it is much smaller than what Russian propaganda tries to make people believe. And Ukrainian elected officials are not tied to any far-right group in the country. Russia has greatly simplified the narrative, according to Professor Marples. So that is the article from the BBC. The BBC simping for Trudeau. That's basically what they're doing. They are simping for Trudeau. You can tell that this incident in Canada, this thing is worrying the collective West. They are very, very worried about what happened in the Parliament in Canada. I just really find it interesting. I mean, I really find it interesting that the BBC is saying that an SS NAZI confirmed that he was part of the SS Galicia Waffen, NAZI, World War II soldier, confirmed, no doubt about it. But I find it interesting that the BBC says that this guy should be afforded due process. There's no evidence linking him to war crimes. There's no evidence linking him to war crimes, and he hasn't been given a fair shake. And he's been smeared by Russian disinformation. While at the same time, you have UK mainstream media going after people like Brand, Assange, and the list goes on and on and on, without any evidence, based on allegations, without an investigation by the police. I just find it very, very interesting that this is coming out of the BBC for this guy, while at the same time they're going after people that perhaps they don't approve of their talking points. Very interesting. Anyway, let's move on now to a couple of articles on the European Union and EU expansion. One article is coming from The Economist, and another article is coming from Politico. And which one should we start off with? The Economist. Let's start off with The Economist. They are saying that it is time for the EU to get bigger. It's time for the EU to grow. The EU is finally rebooting the enlargement machine. Going from 27 to 36 members will require reform of the bloc. And The Economist, the cover of The Economist magazine says why the EU must get bigger. Why it must get bigger. And the reason it has to get bigger is so that it can fight Putin. That's basically it. It can fight Russian disinformation. It can fight Putin's imperialist dream, imperial goals to rebuild the Russian Empire. And the only way that this can be fought is if the EU gets bigger and bigger and bigger. If it grows from 27 countries to 36 countries, and those countries that need to enter the European Union, according to The Economist, are countries like Serbia. Serbia needs to enter the EU. Albania needs to enter the EU. Moldova needs to enter the EU. Georgia, it says, Georgia has to enter the EU. I'm sure that Armenia is going to get on that list as well. All these countries must enter the European Union because that is how they are going to fight Putin. And Politico, they put out an article with the title, Ukraine makes clear it won't accept second-class EU membership. Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal tells Politico Ukraine has met all the criteria to begin accession talks with the EU. Ukraine has to get into the European Union, according to Prime Minister Shmyhal and according to The Economist. Ukraine has met all the criteria, and I completely agree, to be quite honest. I think Ukraine has met all of the criteria to enter the European Union because, in my opinion, the European Union has only one requirement in order to enter. One. That is it. The requirement that is needed in order to enter the European Union is that you have to antagonize Russia. You have to antagonize Russia. You have to poke the bear. If you poke the bear sufficiently, then the EU will let you in. And boy, has Ukraine fulfilled that criteria. So I think that Ukraine should absolutely get into the European Union. That is the only thing that you need to enter the European Union. Doesn't matter if you're geographically located in Europe. It doesn't matter what kind of state your economy is in, or your finances, human rights, rule of law. Forget about all of that. The only requirement, the only criteria that is required in order to enter the European Union is how well have you poked the bear? And so, yes, Prime Minister Schmigel, I absolutely agree. Accession talks tomorrow, tomorrow to enter the European Union. Absolutely. You know my take on this. My take on this is grow the EU to 36 countries. Grow it to 56 countries. The more countries inside the European Union, the faster the European Union grows, the bigger it grows, the quicker it collapses. So I'm all for this. I'm on board with The Economist and Politico on this one. No doubt about it. So let's see. Let's see here. Since we're on the subject of the European Union, let's talk about an EU member state that is having an election this weekend, I believe, and that is Slovakia. And the BBC, they are very worried about, well, the entire European Union is very worried about the elections in Slovakia because the populist leader, the anti-Ukraine anti-conflict leader, someone who's taking a line that's very similar to Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban, Mr. Fico, he is ahead. And many analysts, many polls are projecting that his party will come out on top during these elections. Now, I'm not sure if they will be able to form a government because from what I understand, they'll be well short of a majority in these elections, but they should be the leading party when all is said and done during these elections in Slovakia. And Mr. Robert Fico, he has said that he will stop the funding for Ukraine. No more weapons, no more money to Ukraine. But the interesting part about this is while the EU is worried, while the collective West is worried about Fico coming to power in Slovakia, winning the elections in Slovakia, they are actually saying that this may not be such a big deal. The BBC writes that that Fico's threat is a red herring. That is what the BBC says. Fico's threat is a red herring. Bratislava has been a loyal and steadfast ally, supplying Kiev with surface-to-air missiles and helicopters, even donating its entire fleet of retired MiG-29 fighter jets. However, there's not much left to give. The cupboard's bare, one Western official told the BBC. In other words, for the collective West, it would suck if Fico did win the elections in Slovakia. You would have another leader in the European Union that is following the line of Viktor Orban in Hungary, which is no more aid and money and weapons to Ukraine. But it's really not that big of a problem because Slovakia has already been demilitarized. That's basically what they're saying. They have nothing more to give. Ukraine has taken everything. Quite an incredible statement from the BBC and from this official to the BBC. There is nothing left to give. Slovakia is tapped out. Hungary, actually, I was reading a story today which said that Hungary has told the European Union that they're going to block any type of financial aid to Ukraine until they get an audit from Elensky. they want to see where all the money has gone, like all the billions and billions, the tens of billions of euros given to the Elensky regime. Hungary wants an audit, and until they get an audit, they're not going to give any more. They're not going to approve any more money to the Elensky regime. Actually, I can help Prime Minister Orban out. Prime Minister Orban, just ask for Elensky's property list. Just ask for Elensky. Can you give me a list of all the real estate that you've purchased, and you'll get a good understanding as to where all the money went. There it is. There it is. Let's see here. Should we do some clown worlds? Maybe wrap up this video. Let me see if I have any more interesting stories that I would like to talk about. Let's do some pre-clown worlds, and then we'll get into a couple of clown worlds. How about this for a pre-clown world? Kadyrov is alive and well. Kadyrov met with Putin, I believe, either this morning or yesterday afternoon. It's on video. He met with Putin. All is good. Kadyrov is alive. And actually, some Russian media outlets, they also interviewed Kadyrov, and they asked him how he's feeling, and Kadyrov's like, feeling good. That was pretty much what Kadyrov said. So Kadyrov is all good. The stories about Kadyrov drinking or eating poison that was served to him by his evil chef, the stories they make up, wow. Yeah, these stories that he ate some poison or drank some poison and he was in a coma and he was finito, yeah, those stories aren't true. So we had that admiral of the Black Sea Fleet who allegedly died from the Storm Shadow or Scalp missiles that were fired on the Sevastopol Black Sea headquarters. That admiral, that's debunked. He's alive and well. We've seen him on multiple videos now where he's either listening to Shogu or he's speaking to the media. He's okay, and now we have Kadyrov. Kadyrov is also alive and well. This reminds me of the whole Budanov-Zaluzhny incident. But to be honest, to be fair, I think we've seen Budanov in 1 or 2 videos since he disappeared. Remember when he disappeared for like 3-4 weeks? He did appear in a video that was like AI generated. And then he did one more video, I think at the same time, like the same video, but it was taken from a different angle. That video looked better. The first video that Budanov did when he reemerged from his disappearance, that one looked like it was AI generated. He did... They then did a second video which didn't look AI generated, which was taken at a different angle. But I don't think he's made any video appearances since. Zaluzhny, when he reemerged, there was a video of Zaluzhny at an Odessa science fair. That one looked really, really suspicious. I don't know about that one. Anyway, allegedly Zaluzhny, the general, the commander of the entire Ukraine military, decided to attend a science fair in Odessa. I don't know. Okay, and the video looked kind of strange. Zaluzhny looked kind of off, different eye color, kind of a different look. But anyway, who knows? Sometimes the light hits your eyes and your eyes can turn from green to blue to brown. I don't know. Maybe it was the angle that they were filming. But I think that's the only video of Zaluzhny that we've seen since his reemergence. I don't know. Kadyrov did a lot of interviews. He did interviews with Russian media. He sat down with Putin. Of course, the videos were meant to debunk the rumors that he was in a coma. Obviously, that's why the videos were filmed and shown all over the interwebs. Anyway, that is one pre-clown world. Another pre-clown world is we are getting news that the Ukraine pilots, they are finishing up their English language course in Texas, I believe. They're learning English in Texas, and once the English lessons wrap up in like a week or 2, the pilots will be ready to learn how to fly the F-16s. So there you have it. Pretty soon, Ukraine is going to have F-16 pilots. I'm getting a lot of reports which claim that Russia has pretty much achieved complete like air superiority in Ukraine, at least along the front lines. Like the Russians can pretty much operate their fighter jets. They can pretty much fire missiles, and Ukraine can't really do much. I have been seeing a lot of reports talking about how Russia has indeed achieved air superiority. And now let's do a couple of real clown worlds. Let's do some real clown worlds. Let's start off with, how am I doing on time? Yeah, I'm doing all right on time. Let's start off with Congress voting on the dress code, and they've reinstated the dress code. So I did a video a couple of days ago where I talked about how Congress, for the benefit of Fetterman, who attends the Senate meetings in his shorts and hoodie, that Schumer decided to abolish the dress code. Well, the Senate voted again, or Congress voted again. I'm not sure, the House, the Senate, maybe both. They voted this time to put the dress code back in place. So now Fetterman, when he attends sessions in the U.S. Senate, he's going to have to suit it up. He wasn't very happy about that. So I don't know what's going on. Shorts and a hoodie, no shorts and a hoodie, suits, I'm not sure. I am not sure. Unless you're Elensky. If you're Elensky, you can enter the Senate in your green sweatshirts and your camouflage military pants. Elensky does not, the dress code does not apply to Elensky, that's for sure. But to Fetterman, I think it's going to apply. And someone sent me a message on Locals, and they told me to type in liar.com, to put liar.com into my web browser. And so I did. I typed in liar.com, and you know where it went to? Liar.com redirected me to the Wikipedia page of Justin Trudeau. I believe it was the Wikipedia page of Trudeau. So someone purchased liar.com. Maybe this is old. Maybe this is old news, but I didn't know about this. Yeah, the Wikipedia page of Justin Trudeau. Someone purchased liar.com, and they pointed the domain name to Trudeau. That's a fun clown world. And the final clown world, I've saved the best for last, by the way. The final clown world is that Sarah Ashton Cirillo III, I say the third because the name is very, very distinguished. Sarah Ashton Cirillo III. Anyway, she has come out with a video statement, and Cirillo III claims that the Vovan and Lexis prank call was a deep fake. That's right, it was a deep fake. Now let me pull up a tweet here that I retweeted, I don't know what you call it anymore. Now that the platform is called X, I think it's a repost. This is coming from Wyatt Reed. Breaking: Sarah Ashton Cirillo just uploaded, then immediately deleted, a video claiming to be the victim of a deep fake, an AI generation meant to impugn the foreign fighters of Ukraine. Unfortunately for Kiev's unhinged English language spokesperson, the internet lasts forever. That is such an interesting story. So if I understand this correct, if I got this, Sarah Ashton Cirillo gets pranked by Vovan and Lexis. Sarah Ashton Cirillo says some pretty bad stuff, let's say, about some of the fighters in Ukraine, admits that there are indeed NAZIs, tells who she believes is Poroshenko. Vovan and Lexis, they pretended to be Poroshenko. Tells a fake Poroshenko that Elensky is, not really doing such a good job, and perhaps Porky, the Chocolate King, should be the president of Ukraine. That's kind of what they were talking about. And then Cirillo comes out with a statement and says that this was all a deep fake, and then removes that tweet and the video where Cirillo said this was a deep fake. Someone is panicking. Someone is panicking. Yeah, that's how I see it. Cirillo is panicking. Because Cirillo told Vovan and Lexis some stuff which I imagine some of the Banderites are not going to like. That's just my guess. Could be wrong about that, but that's my guess. And Cirillo tried to cover it up with a deep fake narrative, and everyone's like, that was no deep fake. And Cirillo removed the tweet, but looks like Mr. Reed Mr. Wyatt Reed saved everything. And then tweeted it out. All right, that is the clown world. That is the video on this Friday early evening, the Duran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, ODYSEE, BitChute, Telegram, Rockfin, and the platform formerly known as Twitter, but now it goes by the name X. And go to the Duran shop, 10% off. Use the code GOOD DAY. Take care.